Hello. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can take a couple of Cisco IP communicators and make them effectively communicate with one another by the means of using virtual machines and CME. So let's get started. You're going to need a couple of things though. You're going to need a Linux VM. It can be any distro. I'm using Mint. It's going to need to have Dynamips, which is the Cisco router emulator, and Dynagen, which is essentially the tool that allows you to control and configure the emulated routers. You're also going to need two Windows VMs. They both need the Cisco IP Communicator installed. So let's get started and create some VMs. So I'm just going to type in Linux VM. I'm going to make it Red Hat. Next, I'm going to give it 4 gigs of RAM. 4 gigs. Next, create a virtual hard disk now. Create. Leave that default. Dynamically allocated is fine. I'm going to give it 60 gigabytes. And there's our Linux VM created. Now we're just going to do a Windows VM. I'm going to set it to other Windows. Next, give this 4 gigs of RAM also. Create a virtual hard disk now. Leave that default. Dynamically allocated is fine. And I'm giving this 60 gigabytes as well. Now that this one's created, all I need to do is clone it. Call it Windows VM 2. Next, full clone, press clone, and then you've got your other VMs. So now it's time to configure them. Now, in order to configure the Linux VM, we're going to go into settings, we're going to go into storage, controller IDE, and here what you're going to do is you're just going to select your ISO for your Linux distro, in my case, Linux Mint 18.3. Select it, live CD checked. Okay, we start it up. This is going to basically boot from that ISO and get you to where you should be installing your distro. So we're just going to wait for this to start up, and once it does, I will be back. Alright, so now that we're back here, this is just the basic desktop of my distro. You're going to see something similar here. You're going to want to install it, so double click on this. Just choose your language. I do this, you don't need to, but I like to. Now, on this screen, you're going to have something slightly different. I already tested this, but you will be fine to click Erase Disk and install Linux Mint. Since I already started installing it, this is here for me, but it won't be for you. So go Erase Disk and install Linux Mint. Click Install Now. And then this is just going to give you data on what it's doing with the partitions. So continue. Here you're going to choose your time zone, and then your language. And then you're just going to enter in your data here. I'm just going to pause the video real quick and then return when I've entered it in. Alright, I've entered in all this data, and for ease of access and use, I'm just going to log in automatically, because I'm not too worried about security right now. And then it's just going to start installing your OS, so I will return when it's finished. Alright, so the installation completed gives me this little pop-up telling me it's finished. It's saying you continue testing it now, but I'm just going to choose to restart. Then it's just going to tell you to remove the installation medium and then press enter. So you go to devices, optical drives, press this, and then remove disk from virtual drive. And you'll just press enter. Alright, so now we're at the desktop of Mint. It's all installed and ready to go. Now, one of the first things that we need to do is we need to set up a bridge on our Linux machine to our host NIC. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to go into settings, go into network, change attached to bridged adapter. This is always going to be just like default, so keep it as it is. And then you're going to click on advanced, and you're going to change promiscuous mode to allow all. What this is going to do is this is just going to allow all kind of communication between your host, other VMs, and the Linux Mint itself. So you can press OK, saving the settings. Now it's all set up. And now what you're going to want to do on your Mint is you want to open up a terminal, and you're going to want to type in, you're going to want to install basically the bridge utils that you need so that you can get everything connected to your router. So app install bridge utils. I'm going to want to install these. Alright, so now that these are installed, we can start creating our bridges. So in order to start configuring our bridge, we need to go into this file, which is etc network interfaces. Now this is the file that basically contains all the configuration for every interface that's on your system. So let's go into here. Now this is what you're going to be left with. It's only going to say auto LO and then iFace LO iNet loopback, which is basically just saying it automatically brings your loopback up when the network starts up and automatically assigns a network or IP address to it. Now I'm going to enter in some configuration and then I'll be right back as soon as it's all entered. So as you can see, I've added quite a bit of information to this file. Before you're left with just this and this, which basically just means to automatically bring the loopback up when the network starts and automatically assign it an address. But now we've added ENP0S3 and BR0, this one being our main NIC on our local host, and this one being our bridge. So basically how to figure out what to put here for your main NIC is you open a new tab, you type in ifconfig, and it's going to be basically the first NIC on a new installation. This is just the name it's given, so you take this one and you make sure that it's there so that you can automatically bring it up. Same as the bridge. Now what this is this is basically assigning the bridge a DHCP address, and this here is associating this interface with this bridge. Now this here is an alias, it's kind of a sub interface for the bridge, and you could have it DHCP or have it whatever you like, but in my case I am assigning it an address of 192.168.5.10 on the 192.168.5 network, and the gateway of 192.168.5.2 that's going to point towards my router. Once you've entered in all this information, you can go File, Save to save the file, just close it, and then what you're going to want to do is type in a service networking restart. Alright, now it's going to give you this error because it is kind of confused. The service is it's kind of confused as to what it's doing because BR0 and the sub interface of BR0, they're not physical interfaces, so it's trying to bring up a physical interface, but it can't. It can still bring up the bridge though, and that can be proven if you type in ifconfig, and you can see that BR0 and BR00 are here, and you can check further that they're running by pinging the subinterface. And as you can see, it's pinging. You've got connection between the host and the bridge. Alright, now that we've configured our bridge, what we can do is we can start installing things like Dynamips and Dynagen. Dynamips being the Cisco router emulator, and Dynagen being essentially the front-end tool that allows you to control and configure the emulated routers. So let's get right into that. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up a terminal. We're going to want to type in sudo apt install Dynamips Dynagen. Now I've already installed it, but it'll give you more information than it does me. After you've done that, you want to make a router directory, and you want to go to your web browser. You're going to want to go to this link, because this link is going to be a direct download to a router image file. So you'd go there, press save. I've already downloaded it, so I'm going to cancel, and it'll be sent directly to your downloads folder. There mine is right there. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to move this file that you just downloaded into your routers folder, so C7, and then move it to home/router. Alright, and that seems like it was successful. Alright, there it is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to c7200.bin. Make sure that worked. Alright. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make the configuration file for your Dynagen. So let's make a file called dynagenconf.conf. Now let's open this up. Now this is going to be your configuration file that you're going to run Dynagen with. I'm going to write some information in it and then resume the recording when I'm done. Alright, so as you can see, I've added quite a bit of information to this file. I'm just going to go over a bit of it real quick. So this is basically saying that Dynagen, if you run it with this file, it'll start the service on localhost on port 2000. The working directory is basically just the directory that everything looks to find things, such as 7200 here, which is the model of the router, and basically the image is 7200.bin, which it will find in here. Router 1, this is basically saying that the model is 7200, which is specified here. The console port is 2521, which allows you to telnet into it. So you type telnet localhost 2521, and that would allow you to get into R1. And then the most important things are the tap interfaces on both R1 and R2. These are basically the interfaces in which the router will connect to your local host. For R1 it's tap 1, and for R2 it's tap 2. So that's pretty much it for this file. When you're done with this file, you can feel free to go File and Save, and then we can start by launching Dynagen. But before launching Dynagen, we need to start Dynamips. So let's close out of this. In a terminal, I'm going to type in Dynamips-H for port 2000, because we specified that Dynamips was going to be running on port 2000 on localhost, and then to run in the background. Alright, so now we see it's running like that. It's running fine in the background. Now we can start our Dynagen. Dynagen space, and then the name of the file that you created, the Dynagen configuration file. So press enter, and as you can see, Dynagen is running. Now what we can do is start our routers. So we can go start R1, and as you can see, the router started. Do the same with R2, and R2 is started. Now you can make sure they're started by going into a new tab, into another new tab, go telnet localhost 2521 for R1. That's the console port we specified. And you can see that the image is starting up, it's loading. And 2522 for R2. And also you can see here that the image is loading. Now that the router images are done loading, we can do some configuration. So let's go to interface FA00, which is the interface that we said was connected to tap 1. Let's give it an IP address of 192.168.5.2. It's in the same 192.168.5 network that the bridge is. Let's bring it up, and then it comes up. Now we can do the same on R2. Let's go int FA00 IP add 192.168.5.3, and then no shut. Wait for this to come up. Alright, it comes up, and now we can test if we can ping. So to test if we can ping, obviously we're going to ping 192.168.5.3, and we see you can't, and then we're going to ping 5.2, and see that it also can't. Now the reason it can't is because the tap interfaces were never added to the bridge. So to do that, you can go sudo brctl add interface br0 tap 1, and also with tap 2. And now you need to bring the tap interfaces up. So sudo if config tap 1 up, same with tap 2. And now when you try to ping, you get replies, and you get replies from both. So now your routers are both connected to your bridge and connected to your Linux Mint VM. So now that we've got R1 and R2 up and running on our Linux VM, we can get right into configuring our Windows VMs. So let's get started. It's pretty much the exact same process as the Linux VM. Let's go into the disk. You're going to want to select the server, or in my case it's server, in your case it's a Windows distro, doesn't matter what one. Start it up, and then choose the server again, start, and now we wait for the install. So now that the installer started, click Next, click Install Now. I don't have a product key, deal with that later. Select Data Center or whatever version you have. Press Next, accept the license terms, go to Custom Install and choose the disk that you made with your VM. Press Next, and now we wait for the install. When you get to this point, enter in your password and press Finish. And then your Windows VM is installed. All there is left to do is configure Windows VM 2 and install the Cisco IP Communicators. Do the exact same process that you did for this VM for Windows VM 2. Once you've configured Windows VM 2, what you want to do is you want to go into both Windows VMs, go to Settings, Network, and do the exact same thing you did with the Linux VM. This is going to allow communication between all three VMs and the routers. Settings, Network, Bridged, allow all. And you're also going to add a second interface, which is going to be NAT. Press OK. And this one is going to be NAT also. Press OK. This is going to allow you to connect to the internet on these VMs. Now what you're going to want to do after you've configured both interfaces on both Windows VMs, you're going to want to get yourself a Cisco IP Communicator. It's pretty easy to find online. Just get it, install it. This is version 8.6.1.0. Just get that and install it. Then, once you do that, what you want to do is you want to go into your interface configuration on your Windows machines. For Windows VM 1, go to Properties, and then you're going to want to set the IP to something in the same subnet, and you're going to want to set the gateway to the bridge. You're going to want to do this also with Windows VM 2. Set the IP in the same subnet and the gateway as the bridge. Once you've set the IPs for your Windows VMs, you can try pinging. So go to CMD, open that up, try pinging the gateway, .5.10, it can ping. Try pinging R1, it can ping. Try pinging R2, it can also ping. You want to do the same thing on this VM. Ping the gateway, it can ping. Ping R1, it can ping. Ping R2, it can ping. Now, coming back to our routers, let's do a bit more configuration to get our phones connected to them. So, let's go to the configuration mode, telephony service, and then max ePhones 1, because I'm only adding one phone. You can add as many as you want. And then you're going to want to do IP source address, and then the address of your interface. So that'd be 192.168.5.2, and then port 2000. You're going to want to do the same thing on R2. So telephony service, max ePhones 1, IP source 192.168.5.3, port 2000. Then you're going to configure the max amount of directory numbers, so max dn, let's just say 5, just so we have extra, and do that on R2 as well. Now what we're going to do is type in create CNF files on both. After that, we're just going to do system message and then just call it R1 VoIP. And that'll just basically ensure that that comes up on the phone and you know what router it's connected to. R2 VoIP. Okay, so coming back to our Windows VMs, we're going to want to start up our IP communicators. Just real quick, do that. I'm just going to wait for them to start up. Okay, so now that the IP communicators have started up, you want to click on this button on both, go to Preferences, Network, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your network adapter for both. It's going to be the one that's not none. Do that for both. And then you're going to change the TFTP server to the IP of R1 for Windows VM 1 soft phone, and the IP of R2 for the Windows VM 2 soft phone. And then you're going to press OK, OK, and in a couple of seconds it'll say registering. Okay, so now it says it's registering. This should only take a couple more minutes. I'm just gonna pause the video and return when it's registered. And now, as you can see, both of the soft phones are registered. This one is registered to R1 because it's connected to the IP of R1. It's getting the information from there, and this one's getting the information from R2. And as you can see, it's displaying that system message we configured on each router. So coming back to our Linux VM with our routers, we can see that both routers have a new message in their terminal. This is just the message saying that the phone is registered with the router. This right here, everything after SEP, is the MAC address, so I'm going to be showing you how we can use that. ephone1 MAC address, and then we're going to type this, and then we're going to separate each 4 with a period, enter, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ephone dn1 because we're going to configure a directory number, and then the number is going to be 7862. And now we're going to go back to ephone1 and set the button 2 to be specific, to dn1. Now press enter. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did here on R2. Alright, now that I've configured it here, let's go back to our Windows VMs and see how they're doing. So coming back to these VMs, we can see that the DN has successfully registered to button 2 on each phone, and if you don't see this, you can always just restart the Cisco IP communicator and it should show up then. Now we only have to do one more thing, and that is dial peers. Now back to the Linux VM for the final step, which is dial peers. Dial peers is basically a method in which routers can use to kind of communicate with one another through IP phones. So this is how you go about doing dial peers. So you're gonna exit to conft mode. You're gonna type in dial peer voice, then 7000 VoIP, and it doesn't have to be 7000. I'm just writing 7000 for my sake. Destination pattern, and then 7 ... because both of my DNs start with a 7. It's just the last 3 numbers that are different. So you can do 3 dots, which means 3 of any single digit. So let's do that. And then you're going to want to do something called session target, and that means the router that you want this router to connect to with a dial peer. So in this case, it's the IPv4 of 192.168.5.3 because that is the IP of R2. So that is all for this router, and now I'm going to go on to R2. Alright, so I've configured the dial peer on R2, the session target being the IPv4 address of R1 because that's the router that you want to reach. And now both dial peers are set up, so let's go back to our Windows VM and see if the phones can communicate. So now let's see if R1 softphone can call the R2 softphone. So press this button, let's dial 7962, and as you can see, the call goes through. So let's see if it can call from this phone to this phone. Let's press this button, dial 7862, and the call also goes through. Now, you know dial peers are working, and that's essentially all you need. But I'm going to do a little extra, and I don't really like how it's put up here, because it's just a number. It's not really personable. You can't really tell which phone is what unless you pay really close attention to the numbers, so I am going to give each DN a name. To give a DN a name, all you need to do is go into ephone dn1, type in the word name, R1 voice, and then R2, ephone dn1 name R2 voice. Now let's go back to the soft phones. Now let's see what happens when we call 7962 from R1 voice. Answer and call. Let's call 7862 from R2 voice. Now that's pretty much it. That's the lab. That's basically how you would configure a couple of IP soft phones with CME. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you learned a thing. So have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.